Welcome to IAS project. In this video, let's talk about religion during later Vedic period. So, during the later Vedic period, the rituals that were associated with sacrifices became very elaborate. In our last video, we have discussed that Brahmanas invented these rituals and they also elaborated and expanded these rituals so that the Brahmanas can maintain monopoly over conducting of sacrifices. So normal people, that is Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Sudras, were not conducting sacrifices by themselves. It was the Brahmanas who were coming to conduct the sacrifices even for Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. So these rituals became more complex and required more resources, and they also took longer time during later Vedic period. Let me give you an example. In our previous videos, we have talked about Rajasuya sacrifice. Rajasuya sacrifice was basically a consecration ceremony of the king. From the starting of the Rajasuya sacrifice to the end of the Rajasuya sacrifice, it took 3 years for completion of this sacrifice. Similarly, we know about Ashwamedha sacrifice. Ashwamedha sacrifice is also called as horse sacrifice. And this horse sacrifice or Ashwamedha sacrifice took 1 year for completion. So from this you can see that rituals of sacrifices took very long time in the later Vedic period. During the early Vedic period, rituals were not this complicated. Importance was given to prayers rather than rituals. So rituals were not complex during early Vedic period. But during later Vedic period, they became complex. Moreover, they also took more resources. More resources means that more amount of food grains were being sacrificed, more number of animals were being sacrificed, and so on. So this is how rituals became more complex, required more resources, and took longer time. Moreover, the person who was conducting the sacrifice, who is also called as Yajamana, had to give dakshina or the sacrificial fee to the priests. This thing was also very important. Moreover, during later Vedic period, Brahmanas invented a number of rituals for solving almost all kinds of day-to-day problems. For example, if you want wealth, do this kind of sacrifice and do this kind of ritual. If you want children, do this kind of sacrifice and do this kind of ritual. Similarly, even today also, I am very sure that you know at least one Hindu friend who goes to temple and has some kind of experience with sacrifices and rituals so that he can clear the UPSC civil services exam or any other exam he is going to write. So this is an example you can relate to. So the complicated rituals that are associated with these kind of sacrifices mainly have their origin during later Vedic period. So since rituals and sacrifices were seen as a solution to day-to-day problems, then a kind of a view developed that material wealth can solve any problem. For example, if you are a rich person and you don't have children, then the Brahmana said that you do so and so kind of sacrifice and ritual, then you will get children from God. So this is how rich people had a solution for every problem they had in the kind of many rituals and sacrifices. And this kind of view, that is material wealth could solve any problem view, was opposed in the Upanishads. Upanishads taught that material view was not important. Instead, person has to focus on the Atman or the inner self. And they also should focus on getting the true knowledge for the purpose of peace and salvation. So this is the teaching of the Upanishads. Upanishads did not support the view that material wealth could solve anything. Upanishads said that a person has to focus on inner self, or let's say Atman. Atman can also be called as soul, okay? And Upanishads also said that one must focus on true knowledge for the purpose of peace and salvation. Salvation simply means moksha, okay? So this is the core of the teachings of Upanishads. Moreover, not only Upanishads, but Buddhism and Jainism also oppose the view that material wealth could solve anything. Buddhism and Jainism said that material wealth is not important. Instead, they taught something else, which we will learn in Buddhism and Jainism chapters. But Buddhism and Jainism were against material wealth. So Brahmana said that you conduct rituals and sacrifices, then all of your problems can be solved. So because of these sacrifices and rituals, many animals were being killed. And because of this, what happened was the number of cattle that were available for agriculture and food decreased. We also know this from the word Gogana, which has been used in later Vedic literature. In later Vedic literature, the word Gogana is actually used for guest. The literal meaning of Gogana is that a person who is responsible for the killing of animals, particularly killing of cow, or let's say killing of cattle. So the background of the word Gogana is that, let's say a guest comes to your home, then it was your duty to kill the cow or cattle and then feed this guest with the meat of that cow. So this is how the word Gogana actually comes from. Gogana is simply guest. So the usage of this word in later Vedic literature is a proof that animals were being killed in later Vedic period. Moreover, sacrifices were accompanied by formula. Formula simply means the way you are saying the prayers, or let's say the way you are saying the words that are associated with prayers. These words, or let's say these formula, had to be carefully pronounced by the person who is performing the sacrifice. And the person who is performing the sacrifice was called as Yajamana. Yajamana means the person who is doing yajna. So what does this mean? It means that pronunciation of the words was very important. That is why we say the words that were spoken during sacrifice had a magical power. So if you are not speaking these words properly, then you are not going to get the desired benefits that are associated with that sacrifice. So it means that it is very important for the Yajamana not only to do the ritual, but also to carefully pronounce the words of the formula, or let's say the words that were spoken during sacrifice. So this is where the importance of Brahmana comes in, because Brahmanas were the people who knew how to correctly pronounce these words. So this is again an evidence that Brahmanas had monopoly over performing of sacrifices in later Vedic period. We know that Aryans were not unique to India. Aryans also went to other places. For example, they also went into Iran. So in most of the places that the Aryan went, some rituals were common to all Indo-European peoples. But however, during the later Vedic period, many rituals that were being done in India actually were unique to India. So this means that some part of the rituals of Aryans were common to Europeans and some part were also adapted from the local Indian people who were living in India during the later Vedic period. So this is how later Vedic Aryans adopted some non-Aryan elements into their rituals and into their culture. So we can say that Vedic period was not developed entirely in an isolation. Vedic period also adopted some elements from non-Aryans. This is one example. Another example is that I told you previously that Vedas also contain Dravidian words as well as Munda words. We also talked about Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda has some medical knowledge which was actually part of the belief of non-Aryans. So these are some of the evidences that Aryans also adapted some non-Aryan cultural elements into their culture. So the Brahmanas invented, adopted as well as elaborated sacrifices and sacrificial formulae. This is why Brahmanas claimed a monopoly over priestly knowledge and expertise. So we have just learned that pronouncing the sacrificial formulae correctly is also very important for having the result, or let's say effect of that sacrifice. So since the Brahmanas claimed monopoly of this knowledge, they became very important. And when Brahmanas conducted these sacrifices, the Yajamana for whom the Brahmana was conducting the sacrifice was supposed to give dana as well as dakshina to the priest. Dana is basically gifts and offerings that are given to the priests, whereas dakshina is the sacrificial fee that is given to the priest by Yajamana. Some examples, or let's say some forms of dana and dakshina are: camels were given to the priests, cattle was given, horses, gold ornaments and cloth were also given to the priest by the Yajamana or by the person who was doing the sacrifice. Usually it was the kings who were doing the sacrifices and giving all these elaborate gifts to the priests. But the most important point you have to note here is that land was never given as a sacrificial fee during later Vedic period. This is very important point. Question can be asked directly from this line here. It is not only important in Vedic period, But you also have to know about this line in every age we are going to discuss in ancient India. For example, when we discuss Mauryas, then you have to see whether land was given to the priests by Mauryas for conducting sacrifices or some other work they were doing for the kings. Similarly, even in Gupta period or let's say Harshavardhana's time, you have to note whether land was given as grants to the priest for conducting the sacrifices or for any other work the priests or Brahmanas are doing for the king. Please note this point. So during later Vedic period, grant of land concept was not there. So towards the end of Vedic period, what happened was people were fed up with the priestly domination, cults and rituals, and also in part about the Varna system. Especially this kind of reaction came from Vaishyas and Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas resented Brahmanas because even though Kshatriyas were the rulers, they were considered lower than Brahmanas in the Varna system. Vaishyas also resented Brahmanas because even though Vaishyas were the main producers and paying the taxes, they were given a lower position compared to Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. So this is how Kshatriyas and Vaishyas resented Brahmanas. Anyway, Sudra's position was very bad in Vedic period. That is why they resented all the above. And such kind of resentment, especially by Vaishyas and Kshatriyas, was highest in Panchala and Videha kingdoms. We already know where these places are, but these places will also be very important when we talk about Mahajanapada period, because this is the most important region from where Buddhism is going to arise in the Mahajanapada period. So, since the resentment was high in these areas, Upanishads were also compiled around 600 BCE in both these kingdoms. So, Panchala and Videha are important from the point of view of history of Upanishads and also from the point of view of importance of Buddhism. Please like and subscribe. You can download this presentation from our Telegram channel. The name of the channel is IAS Project. The link for this channel is given in the description section below. Thank you.